Year 1977, a jelly-like fish object disturbs the life of one of the Soviet cities called Petrozavodsk, and not only. This phenomena is allegedly one of the largest mass sightings in the USSR, and it was also seen in Denmark and Finland. Welcome to the story of PETROZAVODSK Incident. Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel. I must be honest, I'm lately caught on UAP and UFO stories from the Soviet countries. I don't know, there's just something fascinating about it. You know, like mostly we all know stories from the US or Europe, basically because they're more accessible language-wise. They're mostly in English. But the Soviet ones, well, there are a lot of very interesting stories coming from those times. And we don't even know about those, especially because, for example, they're in Russian and you don't know the language. Well, I happen to know the language, so it helped me a lot to do the research for today's story. And believe me, you really want to hear this. This is really a bomb. Anyways, just wanted to let you know that I chose today's case, firstly, because I haven't heard that before, like it was new to me. And secondly, this is an unsolved mystery. Up to nowadays, we have some ideas, some assumptions what actually happened there, but there is not like a straight answer, straight solution to this Petrozavodsk phenomena. A sighting that was later called Petrozavodskaya Diva, in translation, the wonder of Petrozavodsk, also Petrozavodsk Incident, that's how I'm going to refer to it throughout the video, took place on September 20th, 1977, in a city called Petrozavodsk, as you might already understand. Petrozavodsk is the capital city of the Republic of Karelia, and if you look at it on the map, then you can see that it's also close to Finland. At that time, Petrozavodsk was the capital and the major industrial hub of the Karelian Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, with a population of 203,000 in the year 1974. So, what happened there? It all started during the night. The first sightings were noticed in the territory of the Republic of Karelia. At 1 a.m. in Medvezhegorsk, at 2:30 a.m. over a place called Lohi, and 3 a.m. over Kovdor, and even as far as Lithuanian city of Palanga. Around 3 up to 3:25 a.m., a luminous flying object was detected by the marine train port employees of Leningrad. Now we know this place as St. Petersburg. And later at 3:30 a.m., a flying luminous object was also spotted by a Soviet fishing vessel crew on the ship called Primorsk that was departing from Primorsk harbor. Some say that it was not one object, but actually it was a composition of several objects. Some even said that it was around 40 objects altogether. So this thing appeared in the east, and then it was moving towards Primorsk, as I said before, where it was first spotted at around 3:30 a.m. Then, abruptly, this thing changed its direction and started to move towards north. And for those who already at the beginning of the story thought, oh, it might just have been meteorite, this shows some signs of intelligence, because it's like moving to one direction and then suddenly to another direction. So there's that. The director of Petrozavodsk Observatory said, I quote, "Employees of the Karelian weather station have never seen similar phenomena in nature before. What caused it still remains a mystery to us, because no deviations in the atmosphere were detected from our weather posts. We are also informed that no technical experiments that would cause this were taking place in our area. I don't believe this means we can say that this was simply a mirage, simply because there were many witnesses of it." Needless to say that the testimonies of the witnesses actually were quite identical. The things that they were explaining, they kind of matched. However, no physical evidence was left after this phenomena ended, and this is the tricky part of it. And we will get to that by the end of the video, so stick around. At this moment, I really wanted to share some of the testimonies of the eyewitnesses. Now, as I mentioned before, the phenomena was already observed in some other cities outside Petrozavodsk. In Petrozavodsk itself, this thing started at around 4 a.m. and ended at 4:50 a.m. A journalist from a local newspaper, after this all happened, went around to catch some eyewitnesses and took some interviews from them. And one of those was also a person who worked on ER car as a driver, and the other one was a doctor, and they had quite an interesting descriptions of what they saw. And I'm gonna give you just a view into what the ER driver said. Around 4 a.m., I took the medical team to a call on Anyokhina Street 37. At around 4:05, we noticed a light over the roof of the house. Then a weird halo appeared and a bright star-like object. From this object there were light streams going out and they filled in almost all of the sky. When the luminous object started to move closer to the Great Bear constellation, the bright light disappeared and the object started to vertically move downwards towards the Onega Lake, where it suddenly stopped. All of this lasted around 10 to 15 minutes. Then it started to create a huge amount of clouds around itself and began to shine very brightly. Afterwards, something separated from one of the light streams. It looked like a ring. It went downwards until it disappeared. This ER crew was not the only one, as you might already assume, who saw this phenomena. There was also a woman, her name was Tamara, and on that early morning she was making a phone call in a phone booth on the street. When I was coming out of the phone booth, I noticed something flashing for a moment in the sky. I dashed out in the middle of the street and saw a huge luminous object in the sky. When it moved, it did not make any noise. It hovered over the roof of Hotel Severnaya. It was light-colored, could not tell, something between blue and gray. Then the object moved towards Lake Onega. I was so scared. When I went home, I could not sleep at all night. Another person, separately from this woman, like they didn't meet each other before they gave this testimony, said that he saw a light hovering over Hotel Severnaya that the woman also mentioned before. So he said that this luminous object was standing over this Hotel Severnaya for around 7 minutes, and then he heard like a humming sound, and then this humming sound became even louder until the moment when this object started to move towards Lake Onega. Again, we're mentioning this lake. You might say that this might be some kind of like mass hysteria, you know, like people hear that somebody said they saw something, and then this story starts to like move around and people start to invent things and add to the story. Remember, I had a video about Voronezh incident. If you haven't seen that, watch that. It's a crazy story, but I am debunking it at the end. Spoiler alert, sorry. But this is, I guess, not the case, because among the witnesses there was also a serious man. He was working for the Academy of Sciences and he was an engineer there, and his name was Mr. Novozhilov, and he also had a crazy story to share about this phenomena. He said that on that morning he was about to go somewhere to some kind of business meeting, or I don't know, like science thing, and he missed the train. So the only option for him was to go to catch a bus. So he went to the bus stop, which was actually like by the highway nearby the Lake Onega, and I quote, "I was standing facing the highway with my back towards the lake. It started to rain and then the sky cleared and I could see all of the stars. I noticed a shooting star that at first I thought was a meteorite. This meteorite did not fall. It stopped halfway in the sky and then began to move towards me. As it approached at me at a large speed, the size and shape of it became more apparent. It had a zeppelin shape. The body of it was covered in bright luminous objects. The object itself was around 500 meters above me. I assume the diameter of the object was around 15 meters and it was around 100 meters long. I panicked as it approached, so to defend myself, I bent down to the ground." According to Mr. Novozhilov, suddenly a light ball came out of the zeppelin-shaped object and it started to move towards north, towards the woods. But the zeppelin-shaped object itself continued to move towards the south. So this light bulb, when it reached a point where there was like a wood under it, it started to move downwards, and then it disappeared into the woods, creating a big splash of light. However, there was no sound. So if you think again that it's a meteorite, think again, because usually when a meteorite falls, there is usually some kind of, I guess, noise or something is left behind, like a crater or something. This, what Mr. Novozhilo described with the light splash and the silent thing when this object fell down, it sounds more like a landing for me. Mr. Novozhilov here, he had a camera with him, yes, and he tried to photograph what he was seeing there. What a brave man, actually. Like, I would be just freaking out there, I guess, just laying flat on the ground and just praying it all ends for as soon as possible and leaves me alone. But yeah, he took some photos, but unfortunately none of them came out very good. Like, this is quite a typical thing for these UAP cases, but one of the photos kind of shows something, you can see something, and I guess that's the only photograph that has remained up to nowadays from this incident. So it looks like this. So this is really like a jellyfish thing that he photographed there. I don't know. At the end, numerous testimonies were collected and all of them were telling something about this object that was like creating a mess on that early morning in that area. Among the witnesses, there were policemen, seamen, doctors, and also employees from the local airport. For example, an unidentified object was also reported by 3 employees of the Pulkovo airport, and among them was a traffic controller. His name was Mr. Blagirev. Allegedly, Mr. Blagirev at around 3:55 a.m. spotted a fireball-like object that was larger than Venus, and it was moving to northeast. And according to him, this like fireball object was kind of surrounded by a rhythmically pulsating coat. Like there was some kind of like a space around it that was like moving in some kind of like a rhythm or so. At first he thought maybe he's seeing northern lights, but then he quickly changed his mind since the fireball object started to move into different directions, and then at one moment it just simply disappeared quickly. So it definitely wasn't northern lights that he saw. Apart from the observations on the ground, also some of the flying vehicles saw something on that morning. For example, a crew from Tu-154 reported that they saw a spherical object at around 12 kilometers of altitude. And also allegedly some of the passengers of airplanes saw something in the sky. And one of them was a Georgian writer. His name was Guram Pajikaridze. He was on a plane from Singapore to Moscow on that morning, and he said that he also saw something when he was looking out of the airplane's window. Further reports in the Soviet Union came from Primorsk, Petrodvorets, Lomonosov, Podporozhye, also from Finnish towns nearby. The list is long. Many reports were accompanied by drawings from the eyewitnesses. By the end of December of 1978, Soviet researchers had already collected around 85 reports from people who allegedly saw this phenomena. So definitely we can say that this was a mass sighting. And another interesting thing is that the factories in that area on that night actually reported that they had some technical problems, like some stuff in there, like electronics was not working properly. And if we look back on the other stories in general about UFOs, then this is a trait that is similar to almost like all UFO cases, like electronics and devices and technology in general does not work. Now, you might assume that this kind of show with so many witnesses was immediately covered on the local media because, you know, people need to know what happened during that night. Weirdly enough, the first little article about the events happening in the sky of Petrozavodsk was published only 4 days after it really happened. And the first who to cover this story was actually national media, not the journalists that were working for their city. But why? Like, the locals should know what happened. Maybe some of them freaked out and thought that this is a missile attack, or some already assumed that it's like a UFO attack or something. Like, people need to know. But if we consider the history of USSR in general, of different incidents, then I guess the secrecy, this does not surprise me. If we remember, let's say, the sad story of Chernobyl disaster of 1986 in Pripyat, like only when the neighboring countries were starting to report that they are having some kind of consequences of this disaster, USSR finally decided that they should announce that a bad thing has happened. And this is how the world learned about it. So I am not surprised that they were kind of trying to like wait a little bit and understand what it is and only then tell to the people. I don't know, but still, I don't think that that's the best way how you work with the citizens. I mean, especially if they were at the center of all of this event, they should be the first ones to learn what happened to their city. Are they endangered? If you understand what I'm thinking and meaning with this. And with this, I just wanted to make a point that secrecy in USSR is something very common, and I am not surprised that a lot of things are hidden even up to nowadays. They might know already the real reason of PETROZAVODSK phenomena, and we will never know because, you know, like, it was USSR secret or so. But let's continue with the story. There's more to it. Now, at the end, of course, they created a research group and they started to investigate this case. And I will tell you what is known about this. So on 1977, they invited a clinical psychologist to evaluate all of the witnesses who gave testimonies about this case, just to make sure that they are sane. And the result, the conclusion was that all of the people were sane and they actually believed in what they were seeing and reporting. So nothing was wrong with those people. This thing actually happened. They saw something, all right? Now we're gonna move to some interesting things. So, Soviet researchers and scientists suggested that what people were actually seeing on that morning was the launching of Cosmos 955 that was happening actually during that morning. And as an example, they mentioned another launching that was happening earlier called Meteor 2, and it was launched from Plesetsk aerodrome. And allegedly, this launching was spotted in a similar way also in Finland and Sweden. So they were kind of making an example of this launching from Plesetsk and saying that, well, if people in Finland and Sweden saw this launching in a similar way that people in Petrozavodsk, that this might be this rocket that we launched on that morning, Cosmos 955. Definitely that's what they saw. But there is more to this. Officially, on documents, this research group that was hired to investigate this Petrozavodsk phenomena, they wrote on the documents that the thing that they saw in the sky was actually a meteorite, and they didn't say a word about satellite launching. Why? Now, this is weird, right? Especially because they used the launches from Plesetsk aerodrome as an example that were allegedly seen from Sweden and Finland. Well, thing is, officially, Soviets were hiding the existence of Plesetsk aerodrome, so they could not put that on paper. So, in general, they hide so many things. How can we believe actually any of it about the launching or meteorite or anything? If they don't tell the truth, they just don't, and it starts to feel like they found actually something else, something huge, and they were just trying to cover up as good as they could. I think you can agree with me. Now, but in general, even if hidden, can the theory of the launching of rocket be true? Like, we understand they couldn't write it on the paper because they were hiding the Plesetsk aerodrome, but can this actually be true? Well, there is actually a thing that is called a space jellyfish that people can see in the sky when a rocket is launched. And sometimes they freak out reporting that they're seeing UFOs or something, or they're thinking it's a missile attack. That thing actually exists, but Can this be the case of PETROZAVODSK phenomena? I do not really agree, because remember, this object was moving into different directions, like incoherently. Maybe it was even intelligent, we don't know. And I wouldn't say that this is how space jellyfishes are always acting, like they do not change direction. Even some independent Russian scientists who looked into this case afterwards, after this official Soviet conclusion of the research was published, they criticized it and said that all of it is a complete bias. And one of them was Felix Ziegel. He was a Soviet scientist and also docent of cosmology, and he said that the theory of the launching is a complete BS, simply because how the people were describing how this object was moving. Usually a rocket is launched in the direction of Earth's rotation, but the way how people described this object to be moving around, it was totally, completely different. So it doesn't really resemble a rocket launching situation here. In addition, even foreign journalists and experts were not buying anything of this Soviet research. They said that it's a complete bias. And one of them was James Oberg. He was an American investigative journalist who specialized in Russian and Chinese space programs. And about this Soviet research, he said, I quote, "This is a ruse, possibly another Soviet attempt to divert attention from the truth about Soviet UFOs." And now, ladies and gentlemen, cherry on the top of the cupcake. And this part of the story simply excites me, and I think it actually proves that the Soviets were trying to cover something more serious here. A copy of this Soviet research was sent back to Center of UFO Studies. That was, as you might already know, it's like a private UFO group that was founded in 1973 by Joseph Allen Hynek. And if you don't know his name by now, like he's a huge person in relation to the UFO history in general, like do your research, but like he's a man that you should probably listen to. I mean, I rely on his conclusions quite a lot, so he's important. So Hynek gave this Soviet research copy to a NASA scientist, and his name is Richard Haynes, who translated this document from Russian to English under a grant from the United States. So this just gives a sign that the Americans were also kind of interested what was happening there in the Soviet Union. Like, of course they were. I mean, they're interested even now. So in general, it just makes sense. So this Haynes, he made sure that the document was translated from Russian to English so that they can understand what was happening there and maybe see if Russians are trying to cover up something. And at the end, when they familiarized themselves with this document that was now translated in English, they started to like heavily criticize it. Like definitely Hynek and Haynes, they were public about the fact that this is a complete BS. And they said, I quote, that this is a key evidence for the existence of unidentified flying objects in the USSR, meaning what I just said before. This actually was something bigger than they were writing on the paper. And in general, my friends, this is all that we know about this PETROZAVODSK phenomena. Like, we have so many eyewitnesses telling almost the same story, and on the paper, what Soviet researchers are offering is a complete BS. I don't really believe that that was a rocket launch, although there are some similarities, but scientists are still arguing with that, as I already mentioned. Definitely not a meteorite. I'm really starting to believe that the Soviets were covering up something really, really serious out there. And really, so much information about so-called Soviet research on this event is missing. Did they investigate the lake and the wood where supposedly the luminous object landed or fell? Did any of the employees or stayers in the Hotel Severnaya saw something that night? And if we think about it, We also do not know how the citizens of Petrozavodsk, the eyewitnesses, felt after this encounter. This is like such a big secret, and I would be so happy to actually really know what happened there. And the only thing that the Soviets learned from this is, I guess, learned. After this Petrozavodsk incident, they created a special project called Sietka AN, and it was created to investigate any further weird phenomena happening in the atmosphere of Soviet Union and Russia. Now, what do you think about this event? I am certainly puzzled, and honestly I do kind of believe that this was a huge cover-up of something really important in relation to the UFOs and UAPs. Like, if we remember in the previous episode, I mentioned George Knapp's story of him visiting Russia during perestroika and how he saw piles of documents, secret documents that Russians are hiding, and all of those documents have stories about alleged encounters of UFOs and UAPs. In those piles, there could be the answer of Petrozavodsk phenomena. Now, let me know, have you heard the story before? What are your thoughts? In which theory do you believe? Maybe you have your own theories. Share them in your comments. And yeah, I'm very happy that you have returned to watch yet another episode on my YouTube channel. I am so happy that you're watching my episodes, although this platform sometimes is quite discouraging in terms of the views. I do believe that I might be also shadow banned or something, I don't know, because I received a message where it says that a couple of things are not available for me because of my history on my channel, and I'm not even so open about so many things. I'm like quite restricted here, so I don't actually understand. But here I am, I'm trying, and thank you so much for those who are watching this video at this moment. Do suggest my channel to your friends, to anyone who would be interested to hear the stories that I'm sharing here. Thank you so much. I hope you are enjoying your day. Stay curious. Love you all. See you next time.